My name is Jonckheere and I come from Belgium. I am really touched by and honored by the invitation that ADAO lent to me and allow me to speak with you this afternoon. I knew about Libby, being the capital of the world in America of asbestos. I just learned that a village in Pennsylvania is now also becoming a capital where, guess what? I come from Capelle in Belgium, which is known as the capital of asbestos. My country may be small on the size of the globe, even though recently you have heard a lot about what happened in Brussels. But Belgium, and that is also something I learned, that I thought Belgium was the highest consumer of asbestos in the world, but we just heard from Brad that Australia is disputing the #1 seat. So if we look at the chart, we can see that even though Belgium is a very small country, thanks to a very powerful lobby, we became #1 user of the asbestos. Thanks to a very powerful family that I will name the Amento family, which has become the third richest family in my country. Also thanks to the effect of reconstruction of the country after World War II and the promise of full employment, which put political and union at ease. If we look at the country, we can see on this map produced by the Cancer Registry that there is a red zone between the capital, Brussels, and the seaport of Antwerp. Of course, this is where you can find the mega factories of Eternit, which established themselves in 1926 along a canal that led to the North Sea. The third red dot on the south side of the country is the third site of the smallest of the 3 Eternit factories in the country. Of course, we cannot blame the bad numbers only to Eternit. On this zone leading to the North Sea, we can also find a shipping industry and also a train maker. We all know that asbestos was also heavily used in the trains. Welcome to my family. My father Pierre was hired as an engineer to Eternit in 1954. When he married Françoise, they moved to the small village of Capelle op den Bosch, and they had 5 boys. The picture of the bottom right is the last picture that we had of the 5 of us with Mom. It happened during the famous solar eclipse in 1999. Mom was not in good shape, but we never realized that she too had been heavily exposed to asbestos after the passing of my father 13 years earlier. So the situation of my village is very simple. You have the canal, and you have the 2 mega factories, one building pipes and the other one building roof material. The third factory that I was talking about near the French border is in Armigny. As you can see, the 2 are located near the village, while the third one is basically by itself in the countryside. Now, let's look at the map. If we look at the mesothelioma mortality rate by country, we can see here again that Belgium has a problem. No numbers are available near the year 2000. All of a sudden, looks like Belgium has no problem with asbestos anymore because the numbers are not made public. You can bet with me that if the number was decreasing, the numbers would be published. Unfortunately, we are in the situation where the death toll is increasing, and of course, the public, the government doesn't want the numbers to become public. So the somber picture of the situation in my family is that after the passing of my mother in 2000, we lost two brothers, Pierre-Paul in 2003 and Stéphane 6 years later. I must indicate that only my father worked at Eternit. The other three were just environmental victims. I'm not going to go over the reason why people can be exposed to asbestos, but you can guess that asbestos in the air, asbestos that my father brought on his clothes was probably the reason why the 7 of us got heavily infected by asbestos. So I'm going to talk a little bit later on about a court case that my mother has initiated against Eternit. But right away, Eternit was after us and after the media, saying that we were probably the only family in the village that was heavily exposed to asbestos. So we got the idea to produce maps of the situation. And this is a situation in Capelle. The red dots represent environmental victims, and the black dots, people who worked at the plant. You can see that the situation is very grim. Both plants occupied up to a maximum of 2,600 people. You can also notice that on the east side of the factories lays a great number of environmental victims. The predominant wind do come from the west to the sea, to the east. So this is probably due to air pollution, asbestos blown by the wind, that we found so many environmental victims on the east side of the factories. For Armigny, the third factory, the situation is a little bit different because people lived in the village and are more spread out. I'd like to point that you may not see it on the maps, but there are 4 different kind of dots on the map, and those are people who committed suicide when they discovered that they were diagnosed with mesothelioma. At Abiva, we were proud to organize a couple of sittings and meetings when the court case took place in Brussels. We were glad that many people from the network of victims came to join us, and we were able to brag about the first time a housewife won against a multinational. I must point to you that Françoise was able to take Eternit to the court because she refused the silence money. When she became diagnosed with meso, she went to Eternit, and I was there with her. And she wanted to express her feelings and rage because she learned that her 5 boys were also heavily contaminated with asbestos. Eternit tried to silence her with an envelope of 42,000 euros. Of course, she would have had to shut and no more court case and no more media appearances, which she refused. So that's why François' case is so far the only court case against Eternit. The investment for research is key. We can see on this graph made by the British Lung Association that the investment for research against mesothelioma is really not leading the pack. So this is something that we must work on, is that per death, we need to invest more money into research. UCB, which is a giant chemical company producing medicine, has put this board at the Brussels airport, inspired by patient, driven by science. But my question is, you're also driven by profit. So when the maps that I showed earlier became public, a couple of retired demographs came to us and asked to look at the numbers. Those are demographs who in the past had made some research for the genocide in Rwanda and Laos. So we cannot dispute the mathematical formulas that they have. And they studied, based on the maps that we produced, they studied the number of victims that we had. So when we look for Armigny, which is the smallest of the 3 factories, they could use hundreds of cases to run the computers. And what they came up with is that the number of years lost for these workers were 20,77 years. For Capelle, it was close to 22 years of life lost. If we break down the graphs, and I'm sorry it has not been translated into English, but I'm sure your level of French is good enough to understand what we are talking about, n'est-ce pas? If we look for the generation born before 1930s, the year lost were about 15 years in Armigny and 11 years in Capelle. But the closer we come to our generation, the generation born in after 1940, we can see that the number of years lost for the people working at Armigny is close to 29 years versus 30 years for Capelle. At ABEVA, we have other issues on the back burner that we work on. Asbestos in public transport is also a concern. And I can say that after the terrorist attack that Brussels just had, asbestos is also the unwanted guest invited during the tragic event, because you may have seen the metro cars being blown, releasing a large quantity of asbestos in the tunnels. We have also approached the politicians, and you can see at the bottom left, to try to improve the asbestos fund. We have a public asbestos fund in Belgium compensating for any victims diagnosed with mesothelioma or asbestosis. We try to expand the list of diseases that could be compensated with the asbestos lungs, which right now is not in the list. Of course, prevention in schools and public buildings is also something that we are active in. Je suis Françoise. You may have heard this slogan in Paris. We all became Parisians after the terrorist attack there in November. So this is something that we are slowly producing and sending out, because even though we won the first court case in 2012, Eternit appealed it, and we are now waiting for the next round. So this is something that we are going to wear when the court case resumes. Being on the list, being full of asbestos, I have 3 children whom in that time frame were asking questions about my future. They were concerned that I could be the next one on the list. So when my brother Stefan was slowly slipping away, I started writing, and I realized that in order to leave a trace, I had to put something in writing so my children would understand why asbestos was the uninvited guest in my family. So I produced this book. It helped me a lot because writing became a medicine. I must say that a publisher became interested in the book, and I was allowed to publish it. It has made, so far nearly 4,000 exemplars of the book have been sold in France and in Belgium. I'm presently looking for an English-speaking publisher that would publish it. I must also say that 6 months after the book was released, my house was burglarized. And computers, and only my computers were stolen. So you may ask questions about the reason why my house was burglarized. Another thing that ABEVA is will soon be doing is to run the 20K, the Brussels 20K with a team. So I brought the t-shirt that I'm gladly give to Linda today. Another thing is this, 30 seconds. This was produced by a couple of our friends, DIY, do-it-yourself guys, who were wondering how we could prevent asbestos from being released when people drill the walls. So this is a little capsule full of what? Full of a liquid. And this could be used every time you drill a wall. You would put the drill bit here, and as you enter the zone that you think is full of asbestos, the dust would be released in the capsule and not in the air. So right now, these gentlemen are looking for investors that would mass producing this little capsule. Thank you for your attention.